Hello and welcome to another episode of Sanctuary. This beautiful tour that we have been taking, looking at the different homes that we have built for our blessed Lord. Today we are a little bit north of San Antonio, a little bit off of 281, and an area that maybe many of us haven't really looked at, kind of the Bulverde area of San Antonio, in a beautiful church that is tucked away. Maybe some of y'all don't even know that it is here. And this is St. Joseph, based in Honey Creek. A beautiful small church today. Here with me is Miss Beverly Way, Barbara Way, one of the most known historians of our parish here. And she was telling me a little bit about the founding. It was founded in the 1860s, and it was originally, there's a small church that still exists at the Guadalupe River State Park, just down the road a little bit. And so that was the original church. And though you said Father still goes there, celebrates Mass on occasion.
Right.
And what were some of the Masses that he celebrates there?
Well, he celebrates All Souls Day, All Saints Day, those Mass during that time.
Okay.
Because there is a cemetery over there.
Okay.
And he does a Mass there, and he does a Mass at our cemetery, too, here. And that's...
About how big was that church, the one there, for those of us that haven't seen it?
It may be about 12 by 12.
Okay, so a little bitty thing.
Little bitty church, yeah.
Everything starts with something small.
Something small.
And
yes.
we have grown to something much bigger here.
Yes, we have.
And this building that we're in front of now, this is y'all's latest church. It's not this last, it's not the first, it's not even the second.
No.
It's about the fourth, if you were telling me correctly.
Yeah. Can you consider the one over at the Kneiper Chapel? Yes.
And it's a Kneiper Chapel. Was that the name of the family that its land was on?
That was, no, the Kuntz land is where that was on.
Okay, so it's on Kuntz
the
land.
Kuntz family, but they called it the Kneiper Chapel.
Okay.
But the name of Honey Creek came from, there was a creek over there by that chapel. It was called Honey Creek. And there were always a bunch of bees around it.
Okay.
And one day, this family sent their son down there to get some water at the Honey Creek, and he got chased away by the bees.
Huh.
So that's where they got the name Honey Creek from. And there's Honey Creek is still there, but there's no bees.
Yeah. Okie dokie. And you were then the church that was first built on this side of the property, you said was in like 1912. 1912.
Well, it was a little earlier than that. It was in right about 1898.
Okay.
And then Father Dressel came, and in 1904 he built the little bitty chapel up on the hill.
Okay.
It was in the honor of the Immaculate Conception.
Okay.
And then in 1912 they completed this church over here.
Okay.
And the gentleman that told me the story, they hauled all the rocks in a wheelbarrow to build that church.
It took a little bit of work.
It came off of the ranch, I guess off of the Lawbox and the Shale Ranch.
Okay. And that's the name of the families, those property this is. It was Shale. And then Lubbock also donated a small portion as well.
Down the hill, down that way.
And so you said this property is about a 50-acre complex. It's not fully completed. You'll have a lot of dreams and a lot of ideas of ways that this parish is going to continue to grow into the rest of our space. This building was completed when?
2006, when we had the dedication.
In 2006. And
Father Janish was here.
Father Janish was y'all's pastor.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And what would you say with this particular building, this church, what's your favorite thing about it?
I guess just everything, because we had a part in picking everything out. The building committee, we got to pick out the furnishings, we got to pick out the structure and everything. And I guess it's just a big gathering space where we can't gather now because of COVID, but at the big gathering space, people congregate out there. They come out here and visit and after Mass. And that's always been a real good tradition of our church, is that people really like to visit after Masses.
Yeah. Now, you were also telling me one little piece of insight before we go into the church. You and your husband got married here
in 1960.
In 1960, and you were actually saying he's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, parishioner.
The oldest living parishioner that never left the parish.
Awesome.
He's been here his whole life.
Yeah.
He turned 82.
Well, that's an awesome thing.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful parish that has been built off of the family kind of feel.
Right.
That it always has had that feeling of we're one family. Yes, we're growing because this region is growing by leaps and bounds.
Definitely.
But it is still a wonderful, welcoming location. I do invite you. It's right off of Highway 46. But at this time, we're going to go ahead and head on into the church. So at this time, let us go ahead and head on into St. Joseph's here at Honey Creek. So we are now standing on the interior of this beautiful church here at St. Joseph's in Honey Creek. As we walk into the church, one of the couple features that I want us to really notice and recognize is the way the church is designed. Many ways, when you look at RCIA, you look at the rites of welcoming and coming into the church. The first place that those who are catechumens and candidates and those coming to become Catholic are met, are greeted, and become a part of the community is at the front doors of the church. And so as we're walking into the church, that is why you see in many places a baptismal font located right in the back of the church, right here in the front, in this area. And I want to invite the camera to come around because I want you to really see this particular baptismal font. It is a little bit different than most places. It's made, but in this particular space, it is made for the person entering the church to actually come into the font and be baptized and then come out. So it is actually more geared toward adult baptisms for a setup like this. But it goes to show a little bit of a recognition of the role and the necessity of RCIA in bringing people into the church. That is part of our mission. Now you were telling me a little bit that there is a meaning behind the mural that is on the back of the baptismal font.
Somebody painted that. Father Janysek wanted that on there, and one of the parishioners painted that for him.
And it's a beautiful thing for those that are usually looking at it. It's a mural of two deer grazing, because the imagery, whenever it's flowing, is that underneath the doe, the one on the left, if you don't know, doe is the one without horns, buck is the one with horns. Underneath the doe's nose is where water would flow into the font. It's meant to look actually like a small creek or river that is flowing. As you may remember in the rite for baptism, one of the things it encourages highly that you need is flowing water, fresh water. And then if it's not needed, then we do the bowl or something with just clean water that we can baptize in. And so this gives that imagery from that rite, that baptismal service that we did. For those that are watching that are not Catholic and wondering, yes, as Catholics, we love giant candles, but that isn't the reason for this candle. This candle is what's called the Easter candle. And in the rite of Holy Saturday, whenever we are baptizing and bringing people into the church, we also look at it as Easter Vigil as a starting of everything is brand new. And so we actually start the rite for Easter Vigil outside. We build a fire. We bless what's called the new fire. We light this candle, a beautiful, meant to be ornate candle that represents the light of Christ in his world and in the church. It is then carried into the church and then set in different places throughout the rite before finally being placed next to the baptismal for the sacraments that those coming into the church would receive. So when you see that giant candle, it is meant to be seen as a reminder of the presence of God in the church itself. As we continue into the church, one of the things that maybe some of us look at and some of us may not like, some may like, is the design and the arrangement of pews and different things. I know there are many that are very traditional. They want the two sets of pews right down the center. Very old school traditional. The thing is, with the growing size of churches that we have in the archdiocese in these areas, how long that church would have to be for it to be two traditional rows. And so you're actually able to fit more people in with these sections in the way that they have it arranged here. Little bit different as well, you may remember from our episode in High Hill, how the tour guide was telling us about the pews, and that the pews were meant to be penance to some degree whenever you were at High Hill. Very straight back, no cushion, but they were also meant to be a reminder. We're meant to go out of the church. So the pews here look a lot more comfortable, but also to remind us that this is our home. We aren't really meant to get a backache sitting in our home parish. And I don't know for yourself, but where does your family like to sit? Where is y'all's spot?
Well, My husband and I usually sit back in the chairs because he is handicapped and can't get out. I would rather sit in the front row, but because of his handicap, I'm not able to do that. But they like to sit in the pews. My family does.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know for myself, I mean, I'm a very distractible person whenever I'm in Mass and if I'm just attending. So I have to sit up in the very front because otherwise I people watch. I sit and I watch. And I've actually said this as a priest to my congregation. My greatest source of entertainment during the Mass is you laity whenever y'all are sitting in the pews. Y'all are my greatest source of entertainment because I love watching the interactions between people. And one of the things, and I'm betting you probably have done it, though you may not want to admit it, I love watching, especially when you got young families with little kids. And there are times when you can tell mom is about ready to thrash their kid, is just not behaving. And if you look right behind them, usually there's an older person jangling keys and waving and doing everything they can to distract that little kid. And I'm betting you've never done that before.
No. I have to tell you a story about that. When my oldest son was, we didn't have a cry room back then.
Yeah.
And it was back in 61, 62. He was just starting to talk. And Father Mulaney was here at the time. And he always gave wonderful sermons. And he was at this one part, and it was the climax. It was getting ready to say the final part. And my son said, "Mom, is he through yet?" I could have crawled in a hole. Father Mulaney laughed about that forever.
I can imagine. For those that are wondering, most of us priests are not bothered by children in the pews. I have so many of y'all come up to me with your kiddos, and Father, I'm so sorry for how my kiddo was behaving, and I didn't even realize your kiddo was there. For some reason, when we come into church, a lot of parents, we kind of, our attention rises a level. If our child makes a little bit of noise or chews on a snack or squeaks a little bit, all of a sudden we get so self-conscious. I have never had a problem with kiddos in the church. Because in my mind, and many priests that you'll hear, the church needs those young bodies in the church. They need the youth. They need those kiddos. I've also wondered, if you're going to wait till they learn to behave to bring them to church, how will they ever learn to behave in church?
Right.
But let them come. Let them get interactive. Let them play with the books, the missalettes. It lets them see it. Open the book. Show them where they're at in it. And I always advise, if you're a young family that's a little more self-conscious, the best place, and you will always argue with me, but it's exactly true, the best place to bring that young family of yours with all those kiddos is that very front pew. Because when they're in that front pew, they don't have all the distractions around them. They don't have all these extra people to play with. And you can always point out, especially if there's kiddos that have gotten to know their priest, you can every so often point out to us and say, Father is watching you. And I have been greatly entertained by having cup families do that, because I can always tell when the parent does it. Because that kiddo gets this shocked look on their face and they turn very angelic for about 3 seconds. Then they go back to being who they want to be. Now, we did mention the cry room in our parish. I believe we still do not have one here in this church, I don't think.
We use the gathering space.
Yeah, the foyer is y'all's cry room. But then we come back. So often I go to a parish and I look at the cry room, and it's almost a sad place because the kids are running around there, they're not doing anything.
That's true.
And the parent is it's the place of utter frustration for the parent. Let the cry room be a place that we go to simply allow our kiddo a chance to have all that sensory overload kind of calm down, to calm themselves, but then bring them back into the church. Let them continue to be a part of the community. I would love to be able to see that, where the cry room is more for those whenever an issue does arrive, not the normal place just to turn them loose. I hope none of y'all hopefully that watch ever do that. Just turn them loose, let them run like crazy people. But let them be a part, let them interact, let them play with your rosaries, let them look at the missalettes, because it'll get them interested and involved in all of those things. Now, that was a great size tangent, but one of the things also I'll do from here is, if you look to the sides, left and right, to my left and right, you'll see the Stations of the Cross that are here in the church. Now, you were telling me whenever we were doing this particular part that these aren't the original stations that were here in the church. So I don't know if you want to give us a little bit about kind of the transition. What ended up happening?
Well, somebody didn't like them, so they changed them.
Do you remember what the original ones looked like?
Yeah, they were more like ceramic. I mean, they were like a dark blue color.
Okay.
And I guess somebody just didn't care for them, so they did some new ones.
Now, I got to say, these are beautiful.
They are.
They are, looks like mosaic, but then also painted.
And they were all hand done by a certain person. I don't know, Father Janusz found somebody.
So Father's another one of those Father Janusz stories.
Just like the baptismal font, he found somebody to do that too.
Yeah, so these are beautiful stations, a beautiful devotional life that we have in the church, which we meditate upon that passion of our Lord. And these stations are meant to kind of bring us into those scenes. And I don't know, for many people, myself, I prefer the traditional style of praying the stations because it allows me more of a contemplative way to get into them and really place myself in each one of those scenes. Where am I in each one? What am I doing? And so stations are beautiful. Usually we're kind of reducing them to only be done on Lent. But they're a devotion you can do all year long. You can constantly pray the stations. In fact, many of the saints that we read about had a devotion to praying the stations of the cross throughout the year, not just during Lent.
Right.
So now we are here before the main sanctuary altar area here at St. Joseph. And a couple of the things I would want us to look at is to see overarching over the altar is some words in Latin, Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus. It comes from the scriptures. It's not just the Latin phrase that we have made up in the life of the church. It comes from the scriptures, from the book of Isaiah, where we get a chance, we encounter a scene in which he's brought into heaven. And he hears the angels singing, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord, the God of hosts." It's one of my favorite verses in all of scripture, actually, is that little story out of Isaiah. And so we have those words here above the altar to remind us this is a sacred space. It is a holy space. Now, you're also saying that it's a throwback, a reminder of the other church a little bit.
We have that in the other chapel, in the old chapel.
So you said when y'all built this church, it didn't have that originally in the plan.
It was added later.
And it didn't feel right without it.
Several of us thought that should be up there.
I think so. It fits. It actually looks like it was meant to be there from the very beginning.
Right.
A couple of other little things that maybe you may not notice. On the left and right, under the Sanctus, you have two letters. You have the Alpha, which is the A signal on the other one side, and you have the Omega, which is the U-looking shaped one. These are Greek letters, and they are also scriptural, going back into the book of Revelation, where Jesus is talking about himself. He says, "I am the Alpha, the Omega," which is the beginning and the end. These are the first and last letters of the alphabet in the Greek alphabet. And so Jesus is speaking, reminding us everything begins and ends with me. So as we continue also, we look at the beautiful sanctuary we have here. There's a beautiful crucifix behind the altar. But also one of the things you were telling me that y'all didn't buy, if you will, the furnishings up here in the altar.
Michael James built our furnishings.
Michael James, and he's not just some random person either.
No, he isn't. He's a member of the parish. He's my neighbor.
Okay.
And he does beautiful work. You'll see that when we get to the other chapel. He did all the altars over there.
Awesome. And so I know one of the things that I'm very happy about is just more of a Father Scott thing. The presider's chair is kind of happier for bigger people. I mean, I'm a bigger guy. I need a chair that actually is not going to remind me that I need a diet every time that I sit down in it. But it is a beautiful sanctuary. You have the levels going up, reminding us that we are entering into a very sacred and holy place. You may remember from some of our previous episodes, we talked about the Eucharistic rail and the importance. This parish doesn't have one, but the stepping up into the sanctuary still sort of represents those same ideas of entering into the heaven itself. Because you must remember, the church has always seen our liturgy as a place where the divine and the human come together. And we use the word clash It kind of runs into one another. And so as we ascend into that sanctuary, the imagery the church wants us to use is that we are actually leaving earth and we are entering heaven itself. And when we come down to receive communion at the steps, we are receiving communion at heaven. Another feature that maybe looks a little different than those who are looking for a traditional style church is the placement of the tabernacle. In very traditional style churches, the tabernacle is up in the sanctuary behind the altar. And there is a little bit of theological meaning behind the move. Whether we agree with it or not remains to be seen, whether what people think. But the meaning of why it is shifted, like in this church, comes from an idea of where your focus is at whenever we are celebrating Mass. You may have noticed, depending on where you're going to church, which way the priest and the altar servers bow and give reverence during the Mass. And so if the tabernacle is behind the altar, even during the Mass, if we would pass between the tabernacle and the altar, we are taught that we turn and we give reverence to the altar, because that is where the action is taking place. Outside of Mass, though, the action is always given to the tabernacle. And so we would bow or genuflect to that tabernacle. And so the idea behind it was for the liturgical celebrations for Mass to go ahead, and so that we're not turning our back and, if you will, turning our butts toward the tabernacle, bowing to the altar, slightly shift the tabernacle off to a side location where it is still given a place of reverence, a sense of importance. Here in this church, there's a beautiful story about how the buying of the tabernacle, to be able to pay for it. You're saying you actually literally wrote the book of St. Joseph.
I wrote a history of the church, and the proceeds from selling the book, I purchased the tabernacle.
That is an awesome small story. And it's a reminder just what little things, once again. I mean, it just seems like something small, probably was like about a 60-page book.
Right.
That was able to sell enough to be able to pay for this tabernacle coming into the church. Now, a couple of things to think about. Usually, traditionally, as you can see, a tabernacle is gold. It is made out of precious metal. This is the same as the chalices and the ciboriums that we use during Mass. And there's a theological reason. Because these items are touching our Lord. And so we want something that is extremely valuable, extremely beautiful, that is not used in everyday manner. I had someone argue with me that, well, when I have special guests come to my house, I serve them in crystal. So I should use crystal at the altar. I said, but Jesus is not any ordinary guest. And it's not that we are serving him as a guest. We are holding his body and his blood in those things. And so we want to make sure there's no pores or holes that those particles can go into, but also it is something very beautiful and gives honor to what it holds. It's a beautiful reflection I did at my last parish at St. Jerome, that there was a time whenever we had my installation as pastor there, and Archbishop Gustavo got the chance to use my chalice for my ordination. And I was very blessed that my parish at home in Panna Maria had bought me a beautiful chalice, way more than I would have ever wanted someone to spend on me. But I was reflecting, as expensive as that chalice was, it could have been worth $50,000. What was inside it was much more valuable. And those chalices, the ciboriums, the tabernacle, are meant to be visible ways to remind us of the beauty that is contained within what it holds. And so we are called to use things made out of precious metal to be beautiful. Now, the box is meant to give it a home, to hold that tabernacle. Was built by the same gentleman here in the parish that did all of the woodwork for the furnishings in the sanctuary as well. But it is an important one for us to recognize. You also have the red candle off to one side, just as a reminder to us that as long as that candle is burning, Jesus is home, if you will. He's in the tabernacle. And so we do give honor to that. We recognize it. But on the front of the stand, to make it look a little more like a lot of what you see on the stations, the rockwork in the church, you have a very beautiful, this is actually mosaic. It is actually just placed in such a way, it almost looks like one solid piece of rock. But it is actually a mosaic of small pieces that were placed to build that front image of the stand for the tabernacle. It is extremely beautiful. So I do invite y'all, come out, take a look at this space, come pray with them. But there is much more for us to still see here at St. Joseph. At this time, we are going to transition to the first church, or the last church that they had before we built this one. And there is much more for us to see there.
Okay, this church was completed in 1912.
Okay.
And the dimensions of the church, couldn't remember all these.
That's okay.
It's 33 feet wide, it's 62 feet long, and it's 72 feet tall. And that is because that's the years of Mary and Joseph and Jesus.
That is awesome.
Those years. And that's what they built the church from, those times.
Well, and it's very interesting because when you do look in the older times when they were building churches, symbolism was everywhere. Mm-hmm. For instance, in Fredericksburg, when we went and filmed at St. Mary's, I served there for a year and I didn't realize the tour guide was telling us that they built the entire church off of a devotion to the five wounds of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so you have fives of everything popping up everywhere in that church, from the windows to the doors to stairs, all sorts of different things in their church. And so it doesn't even surprise me in the least that there's actually was a theological reason, even for the dimensions of what we built in this church. Mm-hmm. Now, as y'all can see on the video, this is a more traditional style and build of a church. There's a choir loft up in the top behind us, a beautiful high altar, or what they would call a tridentine altar, as well as the two side altars. And the thing we have to remember, if I told y'all before in the video, whenever they would celebrate the old Tridentine Mass, concelebration was not something that was done. And so you were very commonly came in and you may have had 3 separate Masses going on at one time. 2 priests on the side altars doing their private Mass because they were told to do Mass every day. And then the main Mass being celebrated at the main altar. You can also remember the Eucharistic rail here in the front that our episode in Kosciuszko told us about, where he talked about that was seen as the altar of the people. The priest received communion at the altar at the top, and then the altar of the people was seen as the communion rail. And so coming to the rail to receive communion was the people, for the laity's opportunity to receive communion at their altar as well. Now, one of the more interesting facts, and I'm going to ask for the camera to it's going to be show us nothing in the camera, but it's a very interesting factoid of the church, is that the floor actually is partially a cemetery as well.
Right.
And so I will ask the camera at this point to kind of point down toward the floor, because I'm going to ask for them to just kind of explain a little bit what I mean by it being, in a way, a cemetery right here on the floor.
Well, Father Dressel built the church, and long before he died, he had a coffin made. Okay. And he stored it in the bell tower. Okay. And at that time, it was known that the kids from the school, there was a Catholic school, they would go up there. They wanted to see that casket up there. He'd catch them up there. But then after he died, they buried him in the floor of the church. There's a plaque right there on the side, right here on the pew. That was on the floor, but when they put the carpet down, they moved that to there. And they, at that time, they buried him, and there was a parishioner, Mr. Most, that did a lot of welding and stuff. And when they buried that box, because it was like a box, and then he said, well, that's not going to do, because if something starts getting an odor, that won't do. So he went and took that and made a metal box out of it, and he welded all the way around with copper so that was sealed permanently. And so he's been there ever since.
Nice. Well, it's a reminder to us that in our Masses, we are connected to those who have died. Mm-hmm. They never actually truly leave us.
Right.
That we are told we're a part of the communion of saints, and that communion of saints is those who have died. That always reminds me of a beautiful story. There was a priest in a diocese that had a small island attached to it. And the bishop decided he wanted to do a count to see how many of his parishioners there were. So he asked the priest to send them the pew counts for the weekend, how many people were attending. And this little island was small enough that maybe 50 people attended Mass with him. But the bishop was confused. The priest sent in, he said, I got 3,000 people coming to Mass. And the bishop called and says, what do you mean 3,000 people? Your church only sits 30. And you only have 50 on the whole island. He says, well, we have to remember that not only those who are living are attending that Mass, but all of those who ever have attended this church attend still. And so he, in a way, sent his report counting everybody from the beginning of the founding of that church all the way to that day. A good reminder to us that we are never really only attending Mass by ourselves, but the communion of saints, the angels all attend with us. And so it's a beautiful reminder, even just having one of the previous pastors here buried in the church building itself.
He built the church in 1912, and he started it in like 1905, and he got sick. So he went back to Germany, and he prayed to the Blessed Virgin Mary that if he got well, he also got in an argument with some of the parishioners over how the church was to be built. So he went over there and he said, if you get me well, I'll go back and I'll build that church. And so he came back, and in 1912 they finished it.
Well, that is awesome. So I do thank you all for joining us. Nowadays, they tended to normally, outside of COVID, have daily Mass here in this space, but they also have adoration 3 days a week, and they are graciously letting us pause their adoration for just a little bit to do this video. But if someone wanted to come join them for adoration, what are the days and times they could come to join them for adoration here?
Well, it's all day. I think it's like from 8 to 10. 6 o'clock, and then 8 to 6 right now.
Okay, and which days of the week? Is it every day?
Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays.
On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. You are welcome to come join them for a little bit of time in adoration to the Blessed Sacrament. At this time, we are going to go ahead and shift out of this building to give them back their time in adoration. And I do want to thank those. They've been here in the room. I didn't want to get them on camera. Some may not have been comfortable with that. But I do want to thank those in the room as well for letting us disrupt them just for a few minutes.
I do want to tell you that these altars, they were torn out at one time.
Okay.
When we turned the altar around, and Michael James, the fellow who built the altars and the woodwork over there, he rebuilt these altars.
That is beautiful.
Himself, and I think he did a beautiful job.
He did. Even the paintings on the side altars are absolutely gorgeous.
He took my wedding picture that was taken from up there, and he got my husband to stand up there, and that's how he judged the heights of all what that's supposed to be.
That works. And so at this time, we do want to go ahead and give them their adorations back. And we continue on to our next place, which is a beautiful prayer space here on the parish grounds. So we're here now at the top of the hill, or what they call the top of the hill chapel here at St. Joseph's, which was dedicated to the Immaculate Conception by Father Dressel in 1904. 1908, you said?
1904.
1904. I thought we had said 8 earlier. But 1904, this chapel was dedicated. It has been remodeled a few times, but you can see it's a small, very intimate place for us to come, spend a little time in prayer. It is a beautiful area. You have a beautiful way of overlooking the church grounds. Beautiful area. You can do picnicking or outdoor prayer at a small altar on the outside of the church. But it's a beautiful, small little prayer area. And I don't know, does your family made use of this? You said you used to teach CCD at times.
Right. And we came up here. The classes came up here all the time, and especially during Lent, they made tours up here to visit and pray, and the classes did. They had to schedule it. And then they did the Hill of the Cross, which is over there, and during Lent mostly. Yeah. But we've been up here. My family has come up here several times years ago. We don't come as much now because my husband can't get around that good, but we have. But it's just a wonderful place to be.
Yep, it's a beautiful, small, very intimate place. For if you're looking for one of those areas you can get away a little bit and just come quiet, pray, be in nature. This is up on the top of the hill. You come onto the grounds of St. Joseph and then just kind of follow the road. You may not be able to get into the chapel. Go past the cemeteries, continue all the way up the hill till you dead end pretty much. And you will find this beautiful area to sit, to pray, and be with yourself in nature. So here we're at another location here on the church grounds where you can come just to quietly pray. You'd come into the church grounds for St. Joseph's, go up past the office, the church, past the cemetery, and up on your left as you're going up the hill is what is called Hill of the Cross. This is a beautiful prayer garden area that is built that has the Stations of the Cross and a couple of different things. And so I don't know if you would like to give us a little bit about what they would find up here.
Well, you find benches where they can stop and do a little meditation or whatever. What happened to the tomb? It's over here now? Okay, there it is. It used to be out here. I haven't been here in a little while. But yeah, they got the tomb over there, and that's where they put him. But if you go around to all these places, you want to walk it?
Sure, we can walk through it.
Sure.
Father needs the exercise.
They used to have the tomb out there.
Yeah.
Watch the armadillos are here.
Yeah, I have a couple of those at my church too. So we do want to invite everyone to come out, spend a little time in prayer. It's a beautiful, quiet area. Here's a great example of those stations, that bench where you can sit, just to meditate upon the path of a passion of our Lord. And so here we have one of the stations, just carved very nicely into a log. Nice little bench to sit on as well. And then you have the cross as well.
They always come up here at Easter and get everything ready because we have, during Advent, we have the stations up here.
This will be a beautiful area to come do the devotion. So as y'all can tell, it's a little bit bigger space than maybe what it looked like on the outside. But it's a beautiful winding trail prayer area where we can come and pray the Stations of the Cross.
All of these were made out of cypress wood. That's all cypress that was cut out. The Garden of Gethsemane is right down there.
Oh, okay.
Below there. Like I say, we have over 50 acres.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot. Our Deacon Legender, he's not with us anymore, but he was the one that got all those made.
This one's got a really nice overlook of the church.
That one's broke.
Oh. Station cracked in half.
We're going to have to fix that one.
Yep.
Well, there's not a lot of grasses around.
Yeah.
replacing some of these.
So as you notice, when we started the walk when we started walking through the stations, there was another path behind me that was called the Labyrinth of Hope. And this is dedicated to a grandson of one of the deacons that served here at the parish, who they lost tragically to a very sad accident. And so it has a path, a way to walk in contemplation, praying through a labyrinth. And so here is the explanation here. I'd rather just simply show you how to pray it, because it's not something I have a lot of experience with. But it is a beautiful prayer and a style of prayer found here. Also at the cross of the hill, if you don't want to do the stations, you can come and pray through the labyrinth. So once again, I do want to thank everyone for tuning in and joining us for this episode of Sanctuary. This is a beautiful location, and I wonder how many people actually even know, even as word is getting out, that St. Joseph's is here. At the beautiful grounds, and really what is out here for you to come to be with. I remind you that as we continue reopening in our diocese and getting a chance to go out to be with one another, consider coming up here to St. Joseph's. It is, as every other place we've toured, an active parish community. They have masses still happening on the Sundays and here on the days during the day. So please come out, join them, worship with them. But I do want to thank you for joining us for our episode today. Hey everyone, this is Father Scott Janysek. If you have been enjoying these videos for our Sanctuary series, I encourage you to go out into YouTube, look up to Today's Catholics YouTube channel, and subscribe to the channel. It'll allow you to be alerted whenever a new episode posts, or whenever Today's Catholic posts anything I think could be very much of an interest to you. So I encourage you, go on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. It'll let you know when our next episode will be upcoming.
Today's Catholic newspaper is for Today's Catholic. The official publication of the Archdiocese of San Antonio is created right here for you. For only $16 a year, you can keep up with current events that impact our Catholic community. Today's Catholic newspaper will keep you informed and inspired. Subscribe today online at satoday'scatholic.org or give us a call at 734 1610.